So I'm going to hand over. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you.
And the crowd is all yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks. It's great. It really is great to be here. I had a nice time with the students yesterday. Someone asked me today if I was ready and what large schedules I have and how many people I'm speaking to. And I said, actually, it gets way easier. I'm now talking to the parents. They all actually kind of want to be here. Where when I'm talking with students, you can imagine they're rolling their eyes walking in to hear about more digital citizenship or digital wellness. But I do try to kind of quickly flip that and get them to understand that I'm actually here to talk about their futures and how they can best achieve what they want to be as a student and as an athlete, as a creative person, and how our screens can help us get there, and they can also take us away from that future and kind of hinder us. And so talking about pros and cons rather than just the negative side really gets them to kind of listen. One student came up to me yesterday and even said, well, I didn't fall asleep. And I thought, well, maybe we'll aim for that this morning. That'll be a good sign if this works, as if we don't fall asleep. But even from a teenager, that's pretty good praise, that they didn't fall asleep. Okay, so today we're talking about the truth about screen time. One of the things that we worry about screens in our young people is that it's going to take away their social skills, right? So this has been up here for a while. As you've walked in, you'll need a partner. Of course, we don't worry about our social skills because we didn't grow up with screens, and so we're all really good at this. So if you haven't yet found a partner, go ahead and look around and try to get one. And if you see someone by themselves, maybe say, hey, would you be my partner? So that we all have someone to work with, because conversations about this stuff are really important. So I'll give you a second just to make sure you know who you're working with here. We're going to have some conversations. And then I wanted to just, because at the very end, I suspect I'll be running through the last couple of slides really quickly. I wanted to make sure you know that this is just the beginning of a number of conversations we're going to have with parents. So if you're only coming to one thing, this would be it, because we're going to try to cover a lot of things just a little bit. But we're going to do deep dives into a number of the topics that we bring up this morning. So later today, we're doing a Ready, Set smartphone, for those people who are about to give their child a phone, or don't think they're going to give their child a phone for 3 years, or have given their child a phone in the last 3 years and want to see some things maybe they want to tidy up. Thursday, we're doing mentoring and modeling, and then strong foundations. And that says rules and boundaries parents of middle school students wish they implemented earlier. It could be parents in general, elementary school parents. Certainly one of the things that happens is once they're a teenager, all of a sudden we feel like there's some problems that we could have sort of dealt with earlier, and now we feel like it's too late. So that's kind of sort of getting some of those foundations set. We're going to do mentoring and modeling again in the evening for people who couldn't make it earlier. And then on Friday, we have got a deep dive into social media, gaming, and mental health. And then also talking about sexting and pornography, what's really happening with students, what are they accessing, how's that affecting them, and how we can engage with them. And I do like to say on this one, just because you show up, no one is going to judge you thinking that you think your child has a problem. Everybody needs to be having that conversation with their child. And so everybody should be there. So don't feel like that's one that you want to avoid just because the topic's a little sensitive. It's a great session for us to talk about how we can help young people to navigate the world that they're living in and the pressures and the content that's out there. So my name is Patrick Green, and I'm a dad. I'm a former teacher. I'm a former middle school teacher, high school teacher. I was in technology leadership for years. I started my career in Washington State. That's where my family lives now. We were teachers. My wife and I, Becky and I, were teachers at the Singapore American School for 6 years originally. And then 3 years into that, I moved into technology leadership, which was managing the digital devices that our students had. And back then in the early days of laptop programs, I ended up interfacing a lot with parents because parents were saying, you've given us these devices and now they're in our home and we don't know how to parent around them. And so I did a lot of parent workshops and things even back then. But years later, the conversations just shifted a little bit. The parents now say, I handed this device to my child and I don't know how to parent around it. Can you help me with that, right? And so the nice thing is that people are no longer sort of blaming, but we're recognizing we didn't grow up with these. Parenting is difficult anyway, and now we've got this in their hands. How do we do that? And so one of the ways we do that is we come together and we have conversations and we share ideas. So that's why we're here together. I moved from Singapore American School to the International School of Prague for a couple years. My son was actually born in Singapore. This is Oscar. He's 15. This is a photo that he allows me to share with other people. And that's really important. When I take a family photo, I say to him, is this one okay for me to share? With this, I will say, I'm going to show this over and over and over again at a bunch of parent workshops. Is this one okay? And he says either yes or no. And then I honor that. And if he says no, I just swipe to the next one. How about this one? But I want to give him the opportunity to own some control over his images. Because that's one of the big problems that we have with young people today is they have these cameras and they take photos of each other, and without consent, they just share it, maybe to make fun, maybe to humiliate, maybe unintentionally humiliate. Or intentionally. And so that's one of the things that I try to do. Anyway, I was at the International School of Prague for a few years. Singapore American School called up and said, hey, we really want you to launch a laptop program the way that you really want to, starting from scratch. And so I got to go back for 6 more years. So we lived in Singapore until my son was 8 years old. And then we decided as Americans, with a kid who was born in Singapore and had lived in a couple different countries, maybe it was time to go home and kind of reconnect with his grandparents and life in the US. And we had planned to just do that for a year. But in that time, I also pivoted from sort of technology leadership, helping teachers use technology in schools powerfully, to working with parents, because I really saw a need. So many people are reading these articles saying how technology is destroying a generation. Phones are destroying a generation. Screens are destroying a generation. Social media is destroying a generation. Those are all the articles that we read. That's what's in our feed. And so what I want to do is bring hope to those people who all they read about is fear, that actually that's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen to your children, because you're here. You're being intentional. You're thinking about, how do I help this child to thrive? What are the boundaries I can set up? What are the supports I can give? How do I coach and mentor and guide this young person into this world that they're going into? And so that's what we need to do. And if we're doing that, they're going to be okay. We can do it. But it requires us to be intentional. It requires us to talk. It requires us to kind of understand what's going on. It requires us to understand our kids and to learn about them more deeply. So hopefully you leave here with a little less fear and a little more hope, and probably patting yourself on the back for some of the stuff you're already doing. So we're going to dive into this. We're going to do it in a team. We're going to battle royale it out. Each 2 people are going to compete to win the prize. I don't know what the prize is yet. We'll figure that out at the end if we have a winner. I'm going to ask you to save your questions, because this is an hour and a half, and I'm seeing we've got about an hour and 5 minutes left. And we're going to get some insights into recent studies. I'll give you some resources. I'm going to push mindsets a little bit, and if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be doing a good job. I'm going to be talking generally. I'm going to be talking a lot about teens and tweens and data we have on them. You're thinking specifically about your child. And here's the deal. Some of the stuff that I say, you get to just leave. You get to be like, yeah, that's not for me. Because your family is different than my family. Your family is unique. Your child is unique. If you have multiple children, they are all unique. I suspect you've kind of figured out that the rule that it worked for kid 1 doesn't quite work as well for kid 2. It's actually because you didn't actually make that rule for kid 2. You made it for kid 1, and kid 2 is different. And so you're seeing some, I gotta flex as a parent. I gotta figure out how to help each kid, how to support them differently. And our parenting strategies aren't gonna work for every family, for every child. And they might work at different ages. And so there is no one size fits all. I'm only gonna give you one rule today that you should follow. The rest of them are, you might try this. You might think about this. This might help you at a different stage and a different age with every kid. But there will be one rule that I suggest that you do, because it's completely backed by research. There's no one who would disagree with it. Other than that, though, you got to make some decisions about how you're going to do this with your child. How many of you have elementary school aged students? And how many of you have middle school age students? And how many of you have high school age students? All right, kind of a mix, fewer high school folks in the room. That's partly because it's more difficult to make changes at that point. And elementary folks, you have the best chance of kind of getting some things in line because you've got the longest time to prepare. You're actually starting to figure out how to parent your middle school and high school kid when they're in elementary by some of the processes and procedures you set up that can carry forward. I know the high school parents, one of the difficult things is when you've already let things go down a path for quite a long time, it is hard to reset. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't. Okay, so we are going to have you working it with at least one partner, no Googling, no chat GPTing. You're just coming up with the answer in your head. You're going to write down your answer. There's 1 point per correct response. And here is your first question. You have 45 seconds to answer it. Children today first engage with digital media at what age? Talk to your neighbor, write down your answer. All right, thank you. So you wrote down your answer. Here's your first chance to be 100% correct. If you said 4 years, you were right. If it was 1970, but it's not 1970. The answer's 4 months. I saw a few of you pumping your fists. That makes me nervous. Maybe you're just rooting for yourself. I don't think we're cheering for 4-month-olds to be interacting with digital media. But this happens because we got this baby in this arm and we're scrolling Instagram in this arm. And at 4 months is when they start to kind of notice, hey, there's this device that makes noise and it's got some light. And there it is. There it is, a foot from my head. And they start to see that this is how the world is. That we all have these devices. We have many devices in our homes. And the thing is, our young people today do not know of a time when that wasn't the case. They were born into a world where everybody had these screens. You and I, many of us, we kind of compartmentalize. We're like, oh yeah, there used to be a time that looked like this, and now there's this time. There is not a kid who will ever understand that in the world anymore. That they don't do that. They don't make a distinction between sort of online and offline. High school students, this came out from Pew Research maybe 3 years ago when they were asked, how often are you online? And they had a few options, but they all selected the option that said almost constantly. And it doesn't mean that they're almost constantly on their phone. It means that they don't have a distinction between being offline and online. They're always able to be online. They have a phone in their pocket. They are connected. Their friends are face-to-face, and another friend is right here, and it went that fast. That's almost constantly online, even though they are offline. They don't see it the same way we see it. And that's just an important thing for us to understand. They don't know that computers used to exist without the internet. Right? And it's hard for us to even remember what we used to do on those computers that didn't have internet. I mean, we made Word documents, and we made a spreadsheet, and we might have played Oregon Trail if you're from where I'm from. We had a game that we played. But these kids don't know that difference. People are handing them these phones at 2 years old, and they're learning to pinch and swipe quicker than we do. They're not afraid to touch any of these buttons. When you and I, some of us in this room, started using technology, we were worried about breaking it. They don't have that worry. They've approached this very differently. But that doesn't mean that they know how to do it the right way. The digital natives absolutely need us. Mark Prensky coined this term digital natives, saying that they're born into this world, and so they are natives to this digital world. But that doesn't mean that they actually know how to treat other people kindly online. As adults, we do a lot of work around how to behave offline. But these kids are online almost constantly. So how much work are we doing about how to behave online? And we're failing. I mean, when I come and talk to parents and I talk about this stuff, I'm actually away from my 15-year-old for 3 weeks, and I've got a lot of things I want to go home and talk to him about because I know that I also am not talking enough with him about his online life. Even though it's pretty much a lot of what I do, I'm really aware of it, I'm still not doing the best job because I grew up in a different time. So we're working on, don't hit your sister. That's what we say, don't hit your sister. Do we ever say, don't hit your sister online? What does that look like? Because they're online. How do we be kind online? And so mentoring, modeling, we've got to engage them in how to be good people online, how to be healthy online. If you think about teaching your child to walk across the street, your child was born into a world with streets, right? But that didn't mean that they knew how to do it. And so you carried them across the street for a while. Or maybe you pushed them across the street in the stroller, but you were kind of attached to them, right? And then eventually you're holding their hand as you walk across the street. You're kind of doing it together. And then eventually you let go of the hand and you're still walking across the street with them. You're nearby. And then you watch them walk across the street. You monitor them watching across the street. You're looking to correct them if they don't do it right. You're paying attention to how they're walking across the street independently. They're not really independent because you're right there watching. And then eventually they have earned your trust, that you know that they'll be able to do it on their own. And so then they do it on their own. And that's a great example of how we can do it online as well. Oftentimes we just hand the phone and many of them are then off on their own. And actually we should be doing it together. There should be a while we're doing it together. There should be a while we are monitoring what they're doing. Even though we're not together, I'm seeing what they're doing. And when I know that they're treating other people well and they're being safe and they're doing all the things that matter to you, I'm not going to tell you what all those are because I don't know. I'm not from your family. But you have these values and you have these expectations for how you want your child to be. And when you see that, then they might earn that independence. And by the way, that's also the part too, is that they actually need independence eventually. I don't know when that is, but they're going to get it when they're 18 and they leave the house. So they probably need to have practiced some of it too. I know that conversation really starts about making sure that we don't let them go off on their own too soon, but also at the end, we're aiming for them to go off on their own. And so we have to keep that in mind, and we'll talk more about that. But they need us. They need coaches and mentors and guides. But parents will say to me, yeah, okay. Just tell me how much time they can be online. Right? Time's easy to measure. But that doesn't actually matter as much as some other things. But let's talk about time. So this is the time that kids are on screens outside of school and homework. And think about your own child, how old they are. How much time do you think they're online, not including school and homework? And these are the average times according to Common Sense Media, 2024 data out of the US. Our 2 to 4-year-olds are doing 2 hours a day. Our 5 to 8-year-olds are 3 hours a day. Our 8 to 12-year-olds are 5.5 hours a day. And our teens are almost 9 hours a day. And even the teenagers, when I show them this, will say to me, like, that's not even possible. Actually, one kid just yesterday here at this school said to me, I don't even have 9 hours outside of school and homework. Right, you don't. And then I said to him, well, what time do you go to bed? And he kind of put his head down. Because he's got 9 hours once he stops doing his homework and he stays up till 3 a.m. And that's what some of our teens are doing. Anyway, this might not be accurate for your child, but this is a good thing for us to consider how some of us might be patting ourselves on the back. But again, it's actually not about time. We'll talk about how better measures, but let's first answer this. Which of the following are current recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics? Those are our kid doctors in the US. What do they say? Have that conversation. Which one of those is a current recommendation? All right, that's your time. You wrote down your answer. If you said A, it's because you've seen it before. That was their recommendation up until 2016. So it was easy to remember 2 and 2, and they changed that in 2016 for a couple reasons. One reason because no one was following it. You saw the numbers on the previous screen, and no one, not even, 2 to 4-year-olds have less than 2 hours a day. So you can't keep saying this thing that no one's following. And also, it wasn't based on science. They admitted they just kind of made it up. They invented that number. And of course, that makes sense. If you're a critical thinker, like what's the difference between 2 hours and an hour and a half, or 2 hours and 15 minutes? And is every kid the same? So when you think about one-size-fits-all solutions, they typically don't work for everyone, right? We know that as teachers, we want to individualize, we want to differentiate, we want to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And you know that as adults too, if you have multiple children, then it doesn't quite always work for both kids or all 3 kids or whatever it might be. So they changed the rules. Both B and C are correct answers if you're keeping score. Give yourself a correct answer for B or C. Less than 18 months, only video chat, and no screens 1 hour before bedtime, and remove devices from bedrooms before bed. So let's talk about B first. Under 18 months, only video chat. That's based on the research about brains and young people. There is no learning happening from a video before 18 months. A 17-month-old looking at a screen is not getting anything out of it. A 17-month-old. They're not getting anything out of it. And so why would we put our kids in front of something? Why would we take away that they're just figuring out the world and they're touching stuff and they're crawling around? Why would we do that to them if there's no benefit? So it turns out 18 months and younger can't learn from video, and so let's not do it. But why video chat? Why is that okay? Because video chat is humans. It's relationships. It's hearing a voice. You're not putting them on there with a stranger. You're putting them on there with a family member. My son had his first video chat when he was 2 days old, because he was born in Singapore and his parents lived in Washington State. And I wanted them to see him, and I wanted him to just go, right. He was 2 days old. He wasn't doing much. He wasn't hearing their voice yet, but that became a part of our family process. This is what we do. On the weekends, we talk to grandma. Why? Because relationships matter. Because this is our family, right? There's a lot of things we're teaching there. And so, of course, video chat's okay. And then no screens 1 hour before bedtime, and remove devices from bedrooms before bed is based on all of the research we have on sleep. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that is a current recommendation. And I'll explain more about it later. But let's go deeper into this policy. They also made this more applicable to more families. Make sure media does not take the place of adequate sleep, physical activity, and other behaviors essential to health. That's way more actionable and understandable. We can align to that much better than 2 hours. 2 hours. Or make sure that your kid sleeps. Make sure that screens aren't impacting their sleep. Make sure that screens aren't impacting physical activity. Our kids need to run around. They need to move. It doesn't say that there, but relationships. We want kids interacting face to face. We want them building social skills. That's important for their health. So we want to make sure screens don't get in the way of that. You could use a screen and do all those things and you'd still be in a good spot. 2 hours, 2 hours and 10 minutes, doesn't really matter as long as you're doing this. And so this information became a lot easier for families to sort of make sure that they're kind of in alignment with. When we see kids like this, it bothers us. We don't like it. They're sort of alone together. And we remember a time when those devices weren't there and no one would ever just been sitting there like this. They would have been talking and probably pushing and shoving and interacting and being physical and having a good time. We don't like this. But when we see this, and I tell you that this is a grandparent in another country that the child's never met physically, we value this. We might even say it's cute. And the problem is, at this age, we've taught the kids these devices have a power to connect humans across time and space. They are a relational device. They're so powerful. And then at this age, we tell them, put your phones down, put your phones down, put your phones down. And then at this age, we think it's cute again. And I just say that to bring up that we do have a bias. I don't know what those kids were doing on their screens. Maybe they were doing something that you actually think is valuable. I was talking with some high school kids in a small group yesterday, and many of them brought up, like, I'll do homework for 3 hours straight, and then I check my phone for 5 minutes, and that's when my dad walks in and is like, what are you doing? You're on your phone all day. And like all of them were like, yeah, that's me too. But we judge, right? When we see on the where they're on the screen, we think they're up to no good or they're wasting time or that's all they're doing. I do that. I'm there with you. I do that with my kid. I try not to. But we're a little bit biased. And we might just say, so what are you doing on your screen? Instead of scolding. We might just be curious because maybe they're doing something valuable. And maybe they're not. There's plenty of time wasting going on. But we don't like to see a kid on a screen. We want them running around outside. We want them playing in the grass. We want them climbing on the jungle gym outside. We want them interacting with other people. We want them interacting with the physical world. Those are all good things. That doesn't mean screen time's bad, though. Just because these other things are good doesn't mean screen time is bad. So one of the things we have to do is we have to stop using the word screen time, actually. We can't lump it all together. Because there are things that you value that they do on a screen. You actually value them being known, right? You like them having friends. So when they're connecting with other humans, you kind of value that. When they are doing something on a screen where they're being creative and they're making something, if they could show you and be like, hey, look at this. You love that creativity. You love that joy that kid is getting from having created something that they're proud of, that they want to show you. You value that. We value different activities differently. Should you keep a screen time limit on how much they can Zoom with their grandparent who lives in another country? Only half an hour of that. Of course not. Some screen time is quite valuable. And some screen time we don't see any value in. But we value things differently. If a kid is scrolling Instagram for a half hour, we value that differently than we would they're creating something. And if they were scrolling Instagram for an hour about the sport that the athlete they want to be, we'd value that a little higher. Or if they're scrolling Instagram for a half hour about how to be a better musician, that seems like it'd be kind of valuable. And if they're scrolling pornography for a while, we don't value that, right? We know that that's going to be pretty negative. So we can't lump all the screen time together. We actually have to talk about what they're doing. And if you have younger kids, you get to be in charge of what they're doing. So don't put unvaluable stuff in front of them. Don't let them start watching short videos. You're in charge with the youngest ones. You give them the content that you want, right? Sesame Street or Dora the Explorer or whatever you've decided, actually this has some of our family values in it. This is what I'm going to allow my kid to interact with. You get to put that in front of them. And don't let them do those other activities. As they get older, it gets more difficult. But we gotta actually talk about what they're doing. In my family, actually, and we're so thankful this is finally transferred to our son, we practice saying what we're doing on our phone. First of all, I don't ever want to be on my phone if my kid's in the room. So one of the things I do when he walks in the room, no, I don't do that. I don't hide it, but I do put it down. So I hear him coming down the stairs, I'll put it down because I want to be there for him in case he looks me in the eye. He might not, he might be going straight to the refrigerator. But if he wants my attention, I'm going to be there for him. So we can put our screens down, but I say what I'm doing if I am on a screen. I'm texting your mom because that was a great idea. Or I might say, I'm writing that down. I'm putting that on the calendar. I'm not ever going to say I'm playing Candy Crush because I'm not. If my kid is in the room, why would I be doing something else? If my kid's in the room and I'm on a phone, I'm saying what I'm doing, and it's a great modeling habit because he started doing it as well. And do you know that I freak out a lot less when he says, hey, I'm going to send some snaps. Okay, he's going to Snapchat with his friends for 5 minutes. It doesn't bother me now that I know what it is, but if he was over there like this, I'd be like, oh, he's always on his screen. But just having an open window into it helps me to feel a little better about it. And I also look at his time, and I know that he's only on Snapchat for 5 minutes a day, so it's not something that I see red flags about, because we're having conversations about it. The other thing we can do about screen time is we can talk about what it's actually replacing. So a lot of parents who are really worried about how screens are impacting their child, and I'll ask them, well, tell me about your child's day. And it's like, well, they go to school, and they don't have any screen time in the morning. Then they go to school, and then after school, we got them in violin lessons, and then after that, they're running cross country, or they're playing soccer, and then after that, they've got some homework time, and they're going to the tutor, and then on the weekends, they're busy with their friends because they're really well liked. And then I'm like, and where's the problem? Oh, sometimes they'll play games for like 2 hours at a time. And they're getting straight A's, and they've got a lot of friends. We got to look for what the really red flags are. That's different than your kid doesn't want to do anything else anymore because of these things on screens. Right? There's a real problem there if it starts to replace those things. But if they're still doing all the healthy things, some of us can sort of calm down a little bit about it because we're seeing all the healthy things, and there's not a red flag. But we have to do that. We have to kind of analyze, like, what's really going on here? And is our kid getting all the things they need healthy? And so we can think about that. World Health Organization changed the conversation about screen time. They stopped talking about time, and they gave us a recommendation on actually how much should each age group move, how much should each age group sleep. And specifically on this topic, folks, the number one thing that I do see in every place that I go where kids aren't getting the healthy thing they need, it is sleep. If kids are being on their phones and it's getting in the way of their sleep, there is a real issue. They are not as healthy. And it doesn't matter if they're gaming or doing social media or researching stuff they're interested in. If it's getting in the way of sleep, it's now a problem. Anyway, so they gave us this, and they poked at us here. Sedentary behaviors, whether sitting at a desk in school, watching TV, or playing inactive screen-based games, are increasingly prevalent and associated with poor health outcomes. So even just sitting in a desk, they're saying that's not great for a kid. And of course, you're in this school where I got to work with the teachers the other day, and you've got some great teachers in this school, and lots of excitement about talking about how to get kids up and moving, and not just always sitting and getting them to do different activities, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and actually being really engaging, not always just sitting in the desk the whole time, because that's not so healthy either. All right, talk to your neighbor about this. What percentage of students are diagnosed with internet addiction each year in the United States? All right, thank you. You wrote down your answer. You got your answer down? And what if I told you the answer's actually not up on the screen? The answer's not up there. And I wonder if your brains all did this if you went this way. Because it's actually that way. There are 0% of students diagnosed with internet addiction in the United States each year because it's not something that our doctors diagnose. They have a DSM-5. This is the book that they use for diagnosis. And internet addiction, social media addiction, phone addiction, none of these things exist. The World Health Organization started diagnosing gaming disorder in 2018, and they would say around the world it's less than 1%. In Taiwan, I just learned the other day that doctors here would say gaming disorder, according to the World Health Organization, is about 3% of the population here, which is 3 times higher than anywhere else in the world. In the US, gaming disorder is something for further study. And the reason I bring this up, because we all know of somebody who is struggling with social media. Some people who have a hard time putting it down. Some people who go to bed with their phone and think maybe I'll just look at a few things, and they end up scrolling longer than they know is healthy. Do we have any of those people in the room? Right? So we know young people also who have trouble. And I'm not saying we don't. I am saying that it's something we can empathize with because these devices are difficult to put down. But also I'm saying when we use the word addiction, when we label, you're addicted, you're addicted, you're addicted, that doesn't feel good to the person being labeled. And I don't think that person is leaning into you after you say that and saying, oh, wise one, please tell me more. And our job is to help this kid get to the better place. We actually want to be alongside them, coaching and mentoring and guiding them in that direction. And if we're doing this with them, you're addicted, it's not helping anybody. So not only do the doctors not do it, we need to not use that word. And you'll see it. There's actually some people out there using it right now quite frequently. And it's bothersome to me because I don't think it's a helpful model for those of us who are actually trying to help kids to be in a better place, to be healthier. Because we don't want to use that word. It's not helpful at all. What we could do is we could ask students, do you ever feel like it's really hard to put this thing down? Because we're feeling that. Do you ever feel like this thing is sort of telling you what to do? And by the way, this is how I approached the high school students yesterday. And there were 400 students in one of those sessions. And I'm just some outsider. They don't know my name. They won't remember me tomorrow. But I'm trying in those few minutes to try to get them to understand that I'm not judging them and I'm not telling them they're addicted. And 15 minutes in, I will ask them. And I've tried to do a good job of being like, hey, I struggle with my phone too. I'm trying to have empathy. And then hopefully in 15 minutes, they're willing to sort of let their guard down and tell me the truth, how they really feel. And I anticipated that 80% of them would say that they sometimes feel addicted to their phones, because that's what happens most schools I go to. And this is actually what they said yesterday. Live in front of everyone with their phones, giving me the data. 63% of them said they sometimes feel addicted to their phone. 25% of them said, yes, I feel addicted to my phone. And 12% said no. And I actually believe the 12% don't feel addicted to their phone. There might be a few kids in there who were just saying the contrary thing to say. Oh, here's an adult talking about screen time. No. There might have been a few kids, but there's a couple kids in there who really don't. There are a couple kids who have that good, there's a couple people in here who don't. Right? There's a couple people in this room who feel like, actually, I'm got a great relationship with my phone. I don't have a problem. And you're probably right, because you've done some things. I ask kids questions. What are you doing to have a better relationship with your phone? And I learn something new at every school I go to. Because the kids have strategies. I actually talked to an athlete here, a student athlete, 2 days ago here in Taipei, and they told me that they actually put all of their devices outside the room every evening. They get their parent doesn't make them do it, but they do it because they want to sleep. They know the power of sleep. That's their strategy. Oh, I just put everything out. If it's in the room, I'll hear a buzz and I won't remember to turn something off, and there'll be something that gets me thinking, oh, I should go check my messages. I don't want that. So I put it outside my room. There are a lot of kids, if you ask them, they have strategies, but they're also feeling addicted to their phones. And you see the nuance there. I'm not telling them they're addicted. I'm asking, and they're going to tell me, yeah, I struggle sometimes. And the thing is, I want them to know it's not their fault. And it's not their fault, and it's not your fault if you're feeling that way. We are just behaving the way that the designers of the apps and games that we use are trying to make us feel. They studied slot machines. Slot machines are the type of gambling that most quickly create problematic gamblers because of how easily the brain can connect the actions with the feeling. And so that easy, simple connection allows a habit to start to form. Problematic gamblers have Their brain tells them, pull that lever again because you're going to feel so good. You pull that lever, you win, you get a good feeling. You pull it again, you don't get a good feeling because you didn't win. You don't win. But sometimes you pull and you get a win and you get the dopamine hit and you feel good and your brain starts to tell you, you could feel great if you pull that lever. That lever could lead to a great feeling. And so people develop a habit of, I just want to pull that lever. And when we think about our devices, have you ever done this on your device? Have you ever pulled the lever? What you're doing is you're saying what's on my screen isn't good enough. I want to refresh to something better. If you go the other way and you're scrolling, you're saying the reason you do this is because the thing on the screen is not giving you what you need and you want the next thing. You're scrolling to get somewhere better, to a good feeling, to a dopamine hit. That's how it works. I'll give you one more example of our phones. Some of you create stories in these different social media apps where you take the time to record a video or some images and you put it out there as a story. And the companies delete it after 24 hours. That's a terrible feature, that I make something and the company deletes it. But why do we do it? Why did they invent that? They invented it so that your friends would feel a pressure to check that every day so they don't miss anything. And some of us have that same feeling. If you're someone who looks at stories, you want to go every day because you know they'll be gone the next day. And so there's this fear of missing out. This is what the companies are doing with us. And I could go on and on about this, by the way. With the kids, I talk about different games that they use and why and they'll look at me like, oh my gosh, yeah. It's actually kind of not fun. It's so frustrating. And here's what the game is trying to make me do. Everything on these is really not about us. It wasn't invented to make us happier, healthier. It was invented to keep us there longer because they sell ads to us and they show us ads, they sell them to someone else. They make money. Our time is their money. They're competing with each other, every one of these apps and games, to keep our attention because they make more money the longer we're there. If you ask students about this, they might tell you some of the things that they recognize in the apps and games that are trying to control them. And that's the conversation I have with the high school students. Are you controlling your scrolling or is someone else? But we can empathize because we feel it too, and we can describe our own struggles. And if you've got a teenager, this would be a great thing to do. If you're just someone who's been doing the lecturing thing and saying, I'm going to block and that's how it works and here's your time limit, maybe that's working great. I suspect there's a lot of conflict. The kids will tell me there's a ton of conflict over screens in my house. I wonder if you want to reduce the conflict. I wonder if you want to have conversations about how actually we recognize how these phones are trying to control us. You might, arming them with that knowledge, asking them how they feel, asking them if they have examples, might get you a little further in that conversation. Because ultimately, your goal is not to control them. Your goal is to have them leave the house and be completely independent, autonomous, ethical decision makers who are super healthy. You're not going to control them forever. How do we slowly release those controls? How do we educate them? Well, we talk to them. We talk to them. One of the things we got to avoid, though, is this techno-panic. Some of us are just techno-panicking. This idea that we only talk about the negatives. We talk about how terrible technology, screens, social media is. And here's what it does to kids. When they hear this, and by the way, this is what they hear from adults in general and everywhere online, it's talking about how awful social media. They're reading, my generation is getting destroyed by social media, phones, games, whatever, right? They read it too. And then we repeat it. And what it does is they stop trusting us. They stop trusting our judgment. I'll give you an example of how that works. So when your child is 7 years old and they're playing Minecraft and you said it's okay to play for an hour, and you told them you can go ahead and play for an hour. And then they play for an hour and 10 minutes. And you start screaming. You lose your mind. And there's a big argument. I told you only an hour. You never put it away. And you lose your mind. Here's what your kid's thinking. Playing with my friends and creating some cool stuff is okay for an hour for my mom. But an hour and 10 minutes, suddenly it's turned into the worst thing in the world. That makes no sense. She's bonkers. I don't know if I can trust her. That's okay. So they do that, they're 7 years old. And you do that multiple times, and they're like, man, this person is so unstable. An extra 10 minutes is going to cause, right, this craziness when I'm just hanging out with my friends. But folks, I'm trying to put you in their brain. Like, that's what they are. They're just hanging out with their friends, building stuff together. Okay, 7 years later, they're now 14. They've got a phone. They don't even have Instagram. They got text messages. And their phone buzzes, and they pull it out of their pocket. And there's something there they were not expecting. It's a naked photo of someone else in their class, someone they know personally, another 14-year-old. And they do not know what to do. They're scared, they're a little freaked out, and they're thinking, should I talk to my mom? And they might be going, I don't know. She might take my phone away. She used to lose her mind over 10 extra minutes of digital Legos with my friends. I'm not sure I can trust her reaction. And of course, we don't want our kids even for a second thinking maybe I shouldn't tell my mom. We want to be the person they go to. We want them in their head thinking, that person's on my team. That person is always helping me. They will know what to do. That's what we want them to think. And so we have to think about, are we showing so much techno-panic that we're putting them in a position to maybe not trust us? Folks, I said this at the very beginning. This might not be you. This might not be your family. You may never demonstrate techno-panic. Maybe you're really calm. Or maybe you always demonstrate techno-panic and you think that's the way to go and you don't like what I just said. Don't take it. But I would challenge you. Is it possible that if you have multiple children, that one of your children, this is going to be that kid who's like, I don't know. Because every kid is different. Some kids are super compliant. And some kids are a little more not so compliant. And in any case, you want them to come to you when they're struggling, when they don't know what to do. And they will end up with this phone having something where they don't know what to do. And they'll need your help. And if you've established that you are a coach and a mentor and a guide, and you've also set boundaries for them, I'm not saying don't set boundaries. These things can be done together. When a kid breaks a boundary and we lose our minds, that's different than a kid breaks a boundary and we're really calm and we talk about the consequences. That's not showing techno-panic. And so we just want to think about that. And by the way, if you think I'm being extra sort of, I screwed this up, and I did so the other day with my own son. But first I'll tell you the story of these students. We had built a technology help center where we wanted students to have some autonomy in their lives. So one area in the school where they could do what they wanted to do, because we were feeling in this school that there wasn't a lot of student agency. There was a lot of being told what to do and not a lot of opportunities for students to create what they wanted to create and do what they wanted to do. So in this space, that was the goal. I walked in, there's these 3 kids up at the sort of the table, and this is what's on their screen. I've never seen it before. I'm super excited. There are 3 kids doing the same thing, having this great conversation. I can hear the excitement. I walk up to them and I say, hey, what are you guys doing? And they didn't hear that. They heard, hey, what are you guys doing? They heard techno-panic because they'd heard it so much in their life from an adult. They think, I have to hide this. I was actually using a really gentle, oh, this is so cool. But I didn't say that. I said, what are you guys doing? And so they heard the techno-panic. They actually all slammed their laptops shut at the same time, tucked it out on their arm, and tried to get away. And I was like, whoa, come back. Let me try that again. And I walked back in and I said, we're going to do that again. Get back to what you were doing. And they think I'm crazy, but I made them do it. And so then I walked in and I said, hey, that looks really interesting. What are you guys doing? And if we would start with a compliment, if we would ever show some interest in what they're interested in, it could bridge the gap a little bit. It might have them actually answer my question. Oh, and by the way, they did answer my question. Oh, we're playing this game called Civilization. How does it work? Oh, well, we each make sort of a country and a culture, and then we got to interact with the other countries and the other cultures, and we got to learn to be diplomatic, and we got to negotiate, and we got to trade. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm a former social studies teacher. This is what I want kids to learn, and they're learning it on their own, and they thought I hated it just because I'm an adult and just because they've heard so much techno-panic in their lives. And it made me realize just how important it is. Because I techno-panic too, and when I do, I go back to my son and I'm like, I'm so sorry that I reacted that way. Because I know that there's going to be a time where he needs me, and I want him to be able to come to me. And so every time I overreact, I do apologize, never in the moment, because I'm not that quick, right? I got to calm down. And I'm trying to do it less, because I want him to not think my dad doesn't understand me, my dad doesn't understand my life. I want him to know that I'm curious and that I'm really helpful and I'm supportive. And we're not talking about devices. We're talking typically about drama between humans on a device. That's what we're talking about. And I want him to know that I've got a lot of experience in human drama and recovering from an argument and stuff like that. So I want to be available for him. Your next question, in the research on kids and screens, which one of these is the best established correlation? All right, you got your answer. Before I tell you the answer, a little bit about the research on kids and screens. There's correlation and there's causation. There's actually a lot of agreement in the scientific community about correlation. These things have some connections. We're not sure exactly how it works, but there's some connections there. We see the connections. There is not a lot of agreement in the scientific community on causation. There's not a lot of people saying this causes that, right? Because it's always more complex. There's multiple factors. Risks and harms. There are risks and there are harms. We all have a risk of getting into a car accident when we leave here today, but we won't all receive the harm equally, right? We won't all get into a car accident today. And so even when there are risks, there are people who are more susceptible to those risks, and there are more susceptible to the harms, and there are people who are less susceptible to the harms. And then there's the effect size. Typically in any research with kids and screens, the effect size is quite small. And then lastly, ethics. We don't do a lot of testing on kids and screens because we're never going to put some kids in a room and make them play video games for 4 days straight with no sleep and then test and see how they feel. Like, we wouldn't do that to them. And so we don't have that evidence. But when it comes to agreement in the scientific community, sleep disruption and obesity would be the right answers from the previous screen. Sleep disruption, obesity is less understood. Sleep disruption, we have all sorts of research behind, and so that's why there is so much agreement. One of the ways is that the light from the phone can throw off our body rhythms. Doesn't work equally with everyone, but for many people, that light can kind of trick our brain into thinking it's not nighttime yet. Don't start creating melatonin. Don't start getting ready for bed. So that's why American Academy of Pediatrics says 1 hour before bed, be off screens. So your body can start recognizing it's the end of the day. It's time to start getting ready for sleep, and your kid is calming down. The second thing is, especially with our teenagers, what they're doing online is sort of arousing. It's exciting. It's important to them. And if they are texting even with friends, there could be some drama. Even just trying to figure out where I am in a social space with how I am with my friends, that can feel tough. And so that's partly why nobody wants to put it down at the end of the night, because some kids are still talking and you don't want to be not in the group when some kids are still talking. And if your friends are being mean to another friend, and then you're like, should I step in and help? And it can be stressful. And so our stress hormone spikes, that's cortisol, and we don't sleep well with that. And then the third way is these things make noise and they buzz and they grab our attention and they're hard to put down. And so this is the one-size-fits-all solution. I don't know how you're going to implement it in your home, but essentially you need to go get an antique alarm clock that is not their phone and get the phones out of the bedroom. That is the that is the thing that the researchers would all agree on. Everybody who's giving, every organization out there who suggests what we should do, the expert recommendations would all recommend no devices in the bedroom when it's time for sleeping. But you already knew that because we talked about one of the ways we can think about screen time is make sure it doesn't impact sleep. That's one of the number one things. Now, I know there's people of elementary school children in here who are like, okay, great, easy. We'll never let the phone creep into the bedroom. That's easier. The first time you hand out an iPad to a kid, you let your 5-year-old start to play with an iPad for a half hour a day or whatever the rules are in your family. You train them, where does this go when it's done? You train them to put it away right here, wherever that is, it's not in the bedroom. And that flows, right? By the time you've handed them a phone, and you're going to say, where does this go? And they're going to be able to go, oh, I'm going to put it with where the iPad always used to go. This is what we do in our family. We don't let phones impact our sleep. But it's more difficult to pull back from this. It is more difficult. Now, you might have if you've got middle school kids or high school kids and they have their phones in their bedroom, you might have a little more success this week because I was just speaking with them about this. I was just highlighting that some middle schoolers are making this choice on their own. I highlighted that with the high school students too, that some high school students for a competitive advantage are saying, I'm not gonna let phones impact my sleep and I'm putting them outside my room even though my parents don't care. That's not maybe your kid, it's not every kid, but at least I've tried to help a little bit. I've told them the same thing about sleep. Oh, maybe I didn't tell you. Sleep is when we grow. That's when our bodies refresh, even when we're done growing, right? Sleep is when we learn. We are actually consolidating the information. Our brain actually does a good job while we're sleeping of kind of solidifying what we learned that day. They will be better students. They will get more chance of getting into the school that you want them to get into if they sleep more. And then the third thing for teenagers, of course, is you look better. You do. You look better if you sleep. And I encourage them to do some testing on that. There's another voice out there right now, Jonathan Haidt. How many of you have read The Anxious Generation? Yeah. He does a good job of getting people around the world sort of interested in making sure that our kids are all right. He's brought a lot of attention to this. And yet, so he's saying social media is a major cause of the mental illness epidemic in teen girls. And yet the research community that's researching kids and screens do not agree with his methods or his conclusions. It's still a great read. It's a great read for us to understand what's happening with kids and what the world is like for them. He also doesn't talk to kids. He says parents should do this, schools should do this. And you see a lot of this conversation happening. What I just want you to know is that the leading researchers in this area don't agree with his conclusions. What they do agree with is we need to support our young people. Some of our young people are struggling. Parents need to do something. Schools need to do something. We all need to do something. We got to partner in this together. We need to support and guide and mentor them. But they're also concerned that if we say it's just social media causing the mental health crisis, we're going to not pay attention to all the other things that are actually impacting young people's mental health. If we think that, a phone ban solves it. Now we don't need to talk to kids anymore because we did it. They don't have a phone ban. Well, a phone ban only works till 3 p.m. And a phone ban, by the way, doesn't follow them to college. It's our conversations that we have with our young people as parents that are helping them to think about sleep and why a school might put in a phone ban. Those conversations where you ask your child, why do you think the school decided to do this? Hopefully they can talk about, they want us to be more face-to-face because they know relationships are so impactful. They want us to be able to focus because they know phones can be distracting. They should be able to talk about this. But you need to be talking about it with them because that's where we get influence that goes beyond the phone ban. The phone ban is just going to try to control them till 3 p.m. each day. It doesn't live with them forever. It's not something they learn from unless we're having conversations. And this week, I know the school is having a lot more conversations with students about the health when it comes to digital devices, because it's through educating and conversations that actually we can have an impact. By the way, just FYI, I'm not worried about who's right here. For me, as a parent, if it's possible that these things could be impacting my kid, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for the red flags. I don't have to wait for them to argue this out. I'm looking for red flags. I'm paying attention. I'm having conversations with my child. And I know that one of the top supports against mental health issues is parental family communication. That my kid knows they're loved, that we talk a lot, and that they have that support. That's one of the most reliable protectors against sort of mental health struggles. Okay, but if we ask students, how is social media impacting you? They'll tell us. By the way, this is way more insightful than just saying mental health crisis. I don't know how to deal with a mental health crisis, but I know how to talk about these topics with my child. So which one of those do you think is the most prevalent for teens? This is what they tell us. Which one of those do you think is the most prevalent for teens? And I'm just going to jump to the answer. Ready? You wrote yours down? I'm looking at our time and realizing I got to speed up a little bit. So the top one, A, was correct. Overwhelmed because of all the drama. Do you remember, have you ever felt left out? Have you ever felt like you didn't know how to solve a situation, an argument? You ever need to get forgiveness from somebody for saying something you shouldn't have said? Like, you get this. You've been there before. This is what they need coaching on. It's not about how to push the buttons in text messages. It's how to be a human in text messages. This is what they need help with. This is what they're asking. And by the way, if they come to us, they are not looking for judgment. If you are fortunate enough for your kid to come and tell you that they're having a struggle with something, don't judge, don't jump to conclusions, and don't jump into action. Jumping into action is like, I'm going to call her mother right now. Jumping into action is, I'm taking your phone away for a week. They're not going to come to you if you do those things. And in fact, if they're really panicked about something and they come to you with it, and you also demonstrate, oh my gosh, this is terrible. If you react that way, you're doing the exact opposite of what they need in the moment. They're a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old feeling panicked. They go to a 45-year-old. They want someone to say, we got this. It's going to be okay. If they know a 45-year-old is also panicked about it, they're like, oh my gosh, this is serious. So we want to be calm. And one of the things we want to do is be prepared. If your child self-reports anything, you want to be ready with this statement. I'm so glad you told me. Just memorize that, because it will be difficult to say it in the moment. I'm so glad you told me. This might be something we need to go sit down on the couch and talk about. And then they go into the couch and you, right? Because you're panicked about it too. But you want them to see calm. And you are so glad you told them. And what does I'm so glad you told me actually really say? I hope you'll tell me next time there's a problem as well. If you do these things, you're less likely to have them come back to you that second time for the next thing that they need help with. So we want to start with, I'm so glad you told me, and then stay calm. I'm looking at our time. We started a little late. I'm going to go through some of these without having you answer them. So my next question was going to be, the average blank-year-old has 1,500 photos of themselves online. The answer to that is 5. And who did it? The parents. We did it. Right? We posted those photos. I posted my first photo before Oscar was born. It was the pixelated photo, the ultrasound. And I put that online. I'm so excited about these pixels, right? Like, this is going to be my kid. We're proud of our kids. We're excited about our kids. They're so, they mean the world to us. And we need to start modeling consent. We need to start asking them, is it okay for us to put these photos up for you? Is it okay for me to share this with the world? Because they need that lesson. You get to do what you want. You are the parent. Yes, you get to do what you want. And don't you want to teach them about consent so that they don't do this to other people and hurt other people? And so we talk about consent. We need to model consent. Parents aren't modeling very well in a number of ways. One, 26% of us apparently are sleeping with our phones and checking them at night. More than that are sleeping next to their phones, but this is people who wake up to check their phones. You don't want sleep. 26% of us. 39% of students told us they wish their parents would put down their phones. Their parents are on their phones too much. Their parents are not available to them. Wouldn't it be sad if that was you? Wouldn't it be sad if your kid was one of those people, oh, my mom's on the phone all the time. She's never yeah, she's got a problem. Actually, it is one of you. One of the students yesterday told me that. A couple kids actually were talking about and the thing is, my parents are just as bad, right? And some of us are. Some of us don't have the best relationship, and the kids notice it. But we're not doing great modeling. I saw, I'm going to skip that and get to this. Because one of the things I talked with students about today, or yesterday, was distraction. I want to make sure you have this in your arsenal as something to talk with them about. One of the most important things or detrimental things about these phones is they distract us. They distract us from learning, they distract us from being a good friend, and they distract us from sleep. They get in the way of these other things. And some of us think we can multitask and do a lot of things. And I talked with students specifically about how these things can get in the way of our learning. And so I'm gonna do that demo with you as well. And so I'm gonna have you, because some of you think you're pretty good at multitasking, it's just the teens who can't do it, but actually it's all of us, so I'm gonna try to prove that to you. And here's what you're gonna do. We're gonna record your time single tasking, and then we're gonna record your time multitasking, and we'll see which one you're better at. So you got your piece of paper out in front of you, you got your pencil, you're ready to go. Here's what you're gonna do. I'm gonna set a timer here, and you're gonna see how long it takes you just to write down line 1 and then line 2 right underneath. Line 1 says multitasking is a myth. Line 2 says 1, 2, 3 all the way to 19. There's one number from every letter up above. Don't start yet. I will tell you when to go, and you're just gonna time yourself and see how fast you can do this. That'll be our baseline. On your mark, get set, go. And you wrote down your time. All right, now we are going to do the same task, except you're going to do multiple things at the same time. You're going to multitask. You're going to write down line 1 and line 2 at the same time. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to fold your paper so you can't see what you just did. Maybe turn the paper over, or whatever you need to do, so you cannot see what you just did. So we're going to do it just the same way, where the assignment's up here. You're writing down line 1 and line 2 at the same time. You're probably going to have to go M1, U2 to finish at the same time. Then you're going to look up and look at your score. And because I know this is a little difficult, I'm going to help you by calling out the score for you. On your mark, get set, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Maybe that's not that helpful. I'll stop. You keep going. And then you're writing down how long it took you. And if you're not done, I'm going to stop now because I want to make sure we get through this. So folks, you might have noticed it took you twice as long to do things. And some of you might be thinking, well, that's not the best example of multitasking. Actually, it is. That's exactly what's happening. Your brain is quickly switching between multiple inputs, and it can't do it very well. It probably took you twice as long. That is the brain research. John Medina, Brain Rules, a great book if you're interested in this kind of stuff. We can't multitask. We humans make 50% more errors when we're multitasking. Multitasking is actually just being distracted. So when your kid is doing their homework and they're writing a paragraph and their phone is buzzing over here and they've written 3 sentences and their phone buzzes and they pull it out and they look at it and they're like, I don't even need that information. And they put it back in here and now they come back to their paragraph. Do they know what they had just typed? They have to reread. They have to essentially start over. This is why these devices can be so detrimental to learning. Can they help us to learn? Absolutely. When we're using them for a task, on the device. When the device is distracting us from a task, they're very detrimental. And so that's a pretty simple concept. Middle schoolers can understand that. High schoolers can understand that. We can talk with our young people about how we need to remove our devices so that we are less distracted. And by the way, there are a lot of middle school students who actually put their device in the other room for 30 minutes. Multiple of them told me this yesterday. I set a timer. They knew the method. They called it the Pomodoro method. They put their device in the other room. They set a 30-minute timer, and then they go to work on what they need to do. Their timer rings in the other room, and they go take a 5-minute break to text their friends, send some snaps. I don't know what they're doing, but they're taking a break, which means looking at their phone. But for 30 minutes, they were focused. There are young people doing a great job trying to be healthier, trying to avoid some of these negative things. We need to ask them. We need to talk about it with them. They know they're distracted. They have ways of dealing with it. One of the things we can do is we can talk with them about their notifications and how they can set their phone up to be less distracting. I mean, whenever you give your child a phone and they have it all, I mean, this thing, it's like everything in the world. What if we trimmed it down? What if we helped them with some strategies? What if we talked about turning off notifications? And many of them actually do. I'm going to do one last question, and then I'll get to the end. We're just going to go a few minutes over. This is your last question. What's missing? What's number 8 and 11? These are the top worldwide most visited websites, August 2025. What's missing? What's 8 and 11? All right, you've written down an answer, maybe 8 or 11. Top most visited websites in the world. Both number 8 and number 11 are pornography websites. And I bring that up because they're top 13 websites in the world. People are accessing this. These are topics that your kids are aware of. The average age of first exposure to pornography is between 8 and 12. If you haven't had a conversation with your 8-year-old about pornography and you think it might be detrimental to them, you probably want to have that conversation. Many of us feel like, I don't want to bring that up to my 8-year-old. Okay, well, you can do it without bringing it up. You can talk about, hey, there's this iPad. You get to use it sometimes. If you ever see anything on this iPad that makes you feel yucky, you got to come talk to me. I'm not going to overreact, but I want to make sure that you're not seeing things that make you feel yucky. You didn't even bring up the word. They don't have to know that it exists. But of course, they can understand that there might be something that makes them feel yucky. Our teenagers are sending their own self-produced naked images. 1 in 4 teens are receiving them. 1 in 7 teens are sending. Usually when I bring this, one of the reasons I'm bringing this up right now really quickly is because we're going to do a whole session on this. It's the last session on Friday. It's about how to talk with your young people about these things because they need us to coach and mentor and guide them. It is a longer conversation than just don't do it. We'll talk about that conversation at that time. Usually, though, when I bring up these topics, parents just want to talk about the boundaries they're going to set up. What button can I push to make sure that my child doesn't ever see any of these things and I never have to talk with them about it? Well, that button doesn't exist. Of course you want to filter and block content. That protects our youngest learners. Eventually, these kids get curious. They become sexual beings. They're interested in their own body, how it works. They're interested in how other people's bodies work. This is a natural progression. So there becomes a curiosity, and some kids are going to go look for some answers, and that blocking when against a kid's curiosity is not nearly as effective as blocking for a kid who doesn't know that it exists, right? So we'll talk about in this session what are some of these other things. But in any boundary that we set up, and you should absolutely set up boundaries, we shouldn't be handing our 2-year-old a phone. I don't know when you're going to give a smartphone to your child, but I hope that when you give a smartphone to your child, you have set some restrictions on it so it's not a full smartphone. And you hold their hand for a while. And you monitor for a while. You got to figure that out. I'm not telling you what age to do it because I don't believe there's a one age fits all thing. Your 13-year-old is different than someone else's 13-year-old. You got to figure out what your process is going to be. But in any case, whatever boundaries we set up, I also challenge parents to think, when am I taking the boundaries down? How am I talking with my child about the boundaries? You set the boundaries for the little kids, they don't even know that they exist. You turn on filtering and blocking, they won't know. A middle schooler will be bumping up against the boundaries, and if you're not talking about them, they're going to be trying to go under. If you've not had a conversation with your 18-year-old about some of this content, it's not that they haven't seen it. They need our influence, they need our coaching and guiding, and they need to practice. By the way, this is what some of the high school students and the middle school students told me yesterday. I want my parents to know that limiting is actually a little bit better than completely blocking. Maybe allow me 30 minutes of something that I'd like to access instead of total blocking. Now I'm less likely to try to do it without you knowing. This is what some kids told me. I'm just sharing that back to you. What I tell parents is this: your child at 18 years old has no more boundaries. Will they have had any time to practice the boundaries? I'll give you my example that I'm struggling with right now. I got to figure this out, but I'll share it with you. We don't allow my 15-year-old son to have his phone in his bedroom. There is a curfew, and it charges in the kitchen. I know that when he's a college track kid. He's going to go to a university, and he is going to be in a dorm room. And he is going to have that phone in his room. He is going to put it right next to his bed if he hasn't had any practice managing this himself. I want him to put it across the room. And so sometime during his senior year, or maybe his junior year, I don't know, we're still figuring this out, I'm going to introduce the phone to his bedroom at home. This is part of my holding hands with him walking across the street. This is part of my monitoring, just watching him walk across the street. I'm going to allow him to have the phone in his room, and we're going to talk about it every day. And because I can see the data, I can be like, oh, looks like you struggled getting off your phone last night. And we're going to talk about it. I don't want to send him out without having had any practice of trying to self-manage. And it's really easy for us to say, yeah, but they can't self-manage. Well, right, they can't self-manage right now, but does that mean you turn on these boundaries until they're 18 and then suddenly they're going to be able to manage? Maybe you think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to work. I want to be there to help my kid and coach him to learn that it's really healthy to actually have my own curfew, put it across the room, turn it into silent mode, and then sleep across the room from it and not be distracted by it. And I want to mentor him through that. So that's my own that's what I'm going to work on. Folks, I thought we had an hour and a half. We started a little late, so I did skip a few things. I do want to remind you of a few things, though, as we close up here. I don't know if we had any winners as far as the score goes and getting questions correctly. Obviously, I was trying to push on our preconceived ideas a little bit, some of our assumptions. But I do think if you're being intentional, your kids are winning, right? If you're thinking about how do I coach and mentor and guide this child, your kids are winning. If you're having conversations about online life with these people, that's what they really need, because they're not able to figure it out themselves. They need wise people in their lives helping them to think about how they can make healthy choices around their devices. The next time you see a scary screen time article that says how it's destroying a generation and you've got middle school kids or older, I would encourage you to bring that article to them. Say, hey, I just read this. What do you think about this? Right? Because you're going to get kind of scared about it and worried about your kid. Instead of doing that, why not ask them, like, is this happening in your school? Do you see this? Is this happening in your life? If you're having difficulty figuring out how to talk about some of these issues, put the article in front of the kid. Ask them. Here's what I'm hearing as a parent. Tell me what your skills are. Tell me how this is relating to you. All right, folks, we have all these different sessions coming up over the next couple days. I would ask you this. If, like that high school kid who told me they didn't fall asleep, If you thought this was something where you didn't fall asleep and maybe there were a few little nuggets that you might take away, if this was at all meaningful to you and you want your child surrounded by other healthy children who are also having parents who are helping them to think about how to have healthier choices around their digital devices, would you get into those WhatsApp groups and your text messages, and would you tell your friends that this was actually fairly worthwhile? That you left with an idea and that you're coming back for other things, and invite them to come join you. Thanks for being here today, folks. If you hit the QR code there, that is going to be actually all of my resources that I'll use in all of the parent sessions. So if you can't come to one of them and you really wanted to, you can look at the resource. Obviously, it's better to be there in person, but I wanted to provide those resources for you. The top resource on that link, once you get it, you'll send me your email. I'll email you back all the resources. The top link on that resource is some of my favorite resources. Some of the books about mentoring young people, about growing up today, about how parents can win at this screen time management thing. So check those out. And thanks for being here. And thanks for being so invested in your child that you took some time out tomorrow to think a little bit more deeply about that. Thanks so much.